Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the NoDQ.com live recap of AEW Dynamite for Wednesday, July 21st. This was night 2 of Fyter Fest. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting things going on in wrestling. We're going to talk about Dynamite. There's some other big news. Make sure you stay tuned to NoDQ.com because it's been a very newsworthy day. There's talk about CM Punk going to AEW, talk about Daniel Bryan going to AEW. We got NXT spoilers coming up for the next 2 weeks. The first night is already up on NoDQ.com, and actually the second night should be up by the time you're watching this video. And we got Dynamite, we got another big show coming up next week. We got AEW Fight for the Fallen. All right, let's get to it. There's a lot to digest here. Shout out to the chat room. Thank you for tuning in. We kicked off with a singles match. Chris Jericho versus Shawn Spears. The first match in the labors of Jericho. MJF forcing Jericho to go through all these different matches. And in this match, Shawn Spears could legally use a chair while Jericho could not. MJF came out and was on commentary for this match. He made fun of Chris Jericho's gut. Jericho got the chair out of Spears' hand right away, but after a few minutes of Jericho in control, and Jericho even had some fun, he grabbed the camera from the cameraman. Spears ended up throwing a chair in Jericho's face to gain the upper hand. He swung the chair into Jericho's bad arm. Jericho was able to make a comeback. He did 9 punches in the corner and then ended it with a Hurricane Rana. But then Spears caught him with a super kick, and he started using the chair again on Jericho. He went for a final shot with the chair, but Jericho got him in the walls of Jericho. This is when Tully Blanchard got on the apron. Sammy Guevara ran down, chased off Tully, and then Spears, he hit the C4, aka the DVD. Jericho kicked out of that, and then Jericho threw Spears into a chair that was set up in the corner. So technically, Jericho did not use the chair, and Jericho managed to pick up the 1-2-3 victory over Shawn Spears. So fun match here to start off the show. MJF was very upset. He said that Jericho will not be able to have anybody else helping him for the rest of this Labors of Jericho series. And he introduced Jericho's next opponent and said it would be a no DQ match. And who did he bring out? He brought out Nick Gage, who is known for his very extreme death matches. He's competed in CCW and other promotions. And yeah, not a guy you would expect to see on a mainstream wrestling show. But here we are. It's 2021. The forbidden door is open. They're bringing in all sorts of people into AEW. And next week, Jericho will be facing Nick Gage in a no DQ match. And later on in the show, Jericho cut a promo and revealed himself as a different persona for this match. He is bringing back the Painmaker character that he had in New Japan Pro Wrestling for this upcoming no DQ match. That will take place next week at the Fight for the Fallen edition of AEW Dynamite. We had a quick video for Miro the Redeemer. That's his new moniker now, and he's going to have a TNT title match in 2 weeks when AEW returns to Daly's Place for their homecoming. That's going to be a one-night thing where they're back in Jacksonville. We had our second match of the evening, which was Kazarian, the Elite Hunter, against Doc Gallows, and Carl Anderson was out there, of course. They had their Impact Wrestling Tag Team titles. that they won at Slammiversary. Anderson got on the apron, was interfering, and he grabbed Kazarian when the referee was distracted. And that led to Gallows being able to hit the sit-down powerbomb, and he scored the 1-2-3 victory over Kazarian. And after the match was over, they hit him with the Magic Killer for good measure. Kenny Omega and Don Callis came down to the ring, and Omega, he kind of screwed up his line, but he said that the Elite Hunter has now become the Elite Hunted. And he was going to use the championship on Kazarian, but then Hangman Adam Page arrived. He got in the ring, and Don Callis said that it's 1 versus 4, but apparently Cowboys are not very bright. Of course, they were in Dallas, Texas for this show. Callis made sure to insult the Cowboys. And Page, he's got more guts than brains, as Gorilla Monsoon might say. He fought them. He was overwhelmed. But then we had the Dark Order run down to make the save. We had Wheeler Utah versus Darby Allin. And this was pretty much a showcase match for Darby Allin. You had Sting and Orange Cassidy on the outside of the ring. And they actually had an exchange. They started doing the kicks back and forth. And then Sting did a very Orange Cassidy-like beating of his chest. Crowd really enjoyed that. And Utah managed to take advantage of what was going on the outside. And he rolled up Orange Cassidy, got a near fall. But Darby managed to get back in it, hit a stunner, and then came off the top with a coffin drop and scored the 1-2-3 victory over Utah. And after the match was over, you had Blade show up, take a cheap shot at Orange Cassidy with the brass knuckles, and that was to set up their match for later in the show. Orange Cassidy versus Blade, and Blade took out Cassidy, so Cassidy would not be at 100% for that match. We had footage shown of Jon Moxley versus Lance Archer in Japan, and the main event for this show was Moxley versus Archer in a Texas death match. And of course, it's Archer's hometown of Dallas, Texas, and it would be for the IWGP United States Championship. We'll get to that in a few minutes, though. We had our Women's Championship match, which was actually not at the 9:20 to 9:30 time slot. They changed it up a little bit this week. Nyla Rose with Vicky Guerrero challenging Britt Baker, DMD, with Rebel. And you had Rebel already helping out, protecting DMD, pulling her to the outside of the ring. And there was a referee screw up at one point. The referee messed up a pinfall count, and the crowd really got on his case about that one. Britt grabbed her glove from Rebel, and she managed to get the lockjaw on, but Nyla powered out of it, and she had a DVD, and then she did her diving knee drop. Britt kicked out of that. Nyla hit a choke slam. Britt kicked out of that as well. And Britt made a comeback, hit two stops. Nyla kicked out of that. And then Rebel got on the apron. And Britt grabbed the championship, and she pulled an Eddie Guerrero. She threw the title at Nyla and then laid down on the ground like Eddie would do. But then Nyla turned the tables, and she threw the title back at Britt and acted like she got hit. She then hit the Beast Bomb on Britt Baker, got a near fall. Crowd popped big for that, of course, the kick out. And then you had Britt pick up the win with the lockjaw, and Nyla Rose tapped out. Still your AEW Women's Champion, no surprise here, but good match, although there were a few moments that didn't look so great. And then there was that one referee issue, as I mentioned, but all in all, nice showing for Britt Baker. Nice title defense for her. And it's interesting because the crowd cheers her like a baby face, but I guess she's still technically a heel, although Eddie Guerrero was doing that whole routine when he was a face. So you could argue that she is a face, but maybe she's just a shade of gray at this point. Who knows? We had a press conference segment to set up next week's match between FTR and Santana and Ortiz. And not much to it, just a little short back and forth between the two teams to set up next week. We had Tony Schiavone in the ring interviewing Andrade El Idolo. And Andrade had a big surprise for everyone. A fan yelled out Charlotte, and that was not the surprise. Andrade has a new executive consultant, and that person was, Chavo. That's right, Chavo Guerrero Jr. is back on the mainstream wrestling scene. He's in AEW, and I'm sure all the AEW haters will say, oh, there they go, signing yet another ex-WWE guy. Chavo, I guess, is going to be the mouthpiece for Andrade. And he said that it's a great time to be a wrestling fan. Excuse me, great time to be a wrestling fan. Let me get some more water. And he said that nobody has more talent than Andrade. This led to the Death Triangle arriving, and last week, Andrade did name drop the Death Triangle, so they confronted Andrade, and Pac said that they hide behind nobody, and Chavo said that they're great talents, but their waists should be shinier. They should be champions. And Andrade asked the Lucha Brothers, why are they working for Pac? They should be working for him. And Pac responded by saying they're a team, they're like family. Phoenix got on the mic, said they're the real face of Latinos. And Penta said that Andrade is not on their level. They stormed the ring, and referees had to separate them. And I wonder if at some point we're going to see Penta and Phoenix maybe turn against Pac and join up with Andrade, and they'll form a faction. I know there's a lot of factions in AEW, but I mean, that would basically be addition and subtraction if the Death Triangle was broken up. Interesting segment here. We can definitely get some interesting Andrade matches, and Andrade versus Pac, I'm sure we'll be seeing at some point. Nick Lavin thinks the same thing. Maybe we'll see the Lucha Brothers turn against Pac and switch their allegiance. We had a quick promo from Christian and the Jurassic Express. They will be facing the Hardy Family Office on next week's Dynamite in a 6-man tag team match. We had Orange Cassidy versus The Blade. And, of course, Orange Cassidy not exactly at 100%. Cassidy snuck into the ring instead of coming through the main entranceway, which threw off Blade. Blade thought that Cassidy was a no-show, but Cassidy was there. Cassidy attacked him. Blade played possum and acted like he was hurt, and that gave him the upper hand. But then Chris Statlander showed up to make sure the bunny wasn't going to continue to interfere in the match. Orange Cassidy managed to hit a beach break on Blade, but struggled to make the pinfall. Bunny got on the apron. Statlander went after her. And while all this was going on, Blade got the brass knuckles that Bunny threw into the ring. And he tried to use them, but Orange beat him to the punch with the Orange Punch and scored the 1-2-3 victory. And then after the match, Orange Cassidy got the brass knucks and hit another Orange Punch on Blade for good measure. So, nice match here. Orange Cassidy gets a little bit of payback. Dylan sent in a $5 super chat. Thank you, Dylan. Much appreciated. Says, would you agree that Chavo was pretty much buried most of his time in WWE and even in WCW? He's a very underrated talent in my opinion. Yeah, you could say that. Chavo had a couple of good moments, though. I remember when Eddie got really hot, like in late 2003. Chavo did get somewhat of a push, and he was doing all right. I think he had a pretty decent run in WWE. I wouldn't say he was buried. Now, the Kerwin White thing that Colin Andrew brings up, yeah, that was not a good idea for Chavo. But I would say up until that point, he was doing fairly well in WWE and had a pretty decent run. And he had some pretty cool music too. And the whole thing with Chavo Classic was very entertaining too. So yeah, I would say 2003, 2004, Chavo had a pretty decent run in WWE. And Mod W says, I hated Chavo versus Hornswoggle. Well, thank you for reminding me of that. So yeah, maybe the end of Chavo's run wasn't so great, but those early years, 2003, 2004, was pretty good for him. Nick Lavin says once Eddie died, Chavo's career was pretty much over as far as being taken seriously. And you're probably right about that. We had, excuse me, we had a video package for Malachi Black versus Cody Rhodes. That match will be taking place in 2 weeks at the Jacksonville Homecoming edition of AEW Dynamite. We then had our main event match, which was Jon Moxley defending the IWGP United States title against Lance Archer in a Texas death match. Moxley came through the crowd as usual. Moxley went right after Archer, who was announced being from Dallas, Texas. So Archer got some good cheers in here, and actually towards the end of the match, the crowd started to turn against Moxley. They were into him at first, but yeah, they did get behind Archer as the match went on. Crazy match. They brawled in the crowd. Archer attacked a fan and threw him onto Moxley. And then Archer exposed the ringside concrete, but that backfired on him. He got DDT'd on the floor, got busted open, but fortunately for him, Jake Roberts helped him up to get back in the ring. Moxley then had a fork channeling Abdullah the Butcher, using the fork as a weapon. Crowd loved this, of course. And Moxley was flipping off Archer, put Archer's leg in a chair, and then jumped off the top, the whole Steve Austin, Brian Pillman spot. And Archer ended up punching a trash can lid into Moxley's face. Moxley got busted open at this point. Moxley then bit Archer, hit a low blow, and I think this is where the fans really started to turn against Moxley, even though it's a Texas death match, so, anything goes. Why they would think a low blow is out of line. I think they just wanted to cheer for their hometown guy. I think that's what it came down to. And Moxley had these two chairs set up. He ended up getting chokeslammed onto the edge of the chairs, and that looked brutal. And then Moxley recovered, hit a paradigm shift, but then Archer popped up, flipped off Moxley in defiance, and Moxley started repeatedly stabbing him with the fork. And then Moxley set up some tables and put barbed wire boards on top of the tables. And it looked like it was going to be over for Archer. They got on the apron, but Archer used the fork on Moxley, fought fire with fire, and then chokeslammed Moxley through the barbed wire boards and the tables, and Moxley got counted out in the death match, thus making Lance Archer your brand new IWGP United States champion. Moxley was stuck in the barbed wire, so he couldn't even get up if he wanted to. So a really fun match. Very violent, so if that's your thing, you'll really like this match if you didn't see it. And I suspect next week with Jericho and Nick Gage, we're going to see another very violent match. And afterwards, Haku's son, who wrestles in New Japan Pro Wrestling, got into the ring, and they're going to have a match for the title on next week's show. So yeah, really fun show, and I completely agree with Dylan. Archer really needed this win. You know, he hasn't been picking up a lot of big wins. Like, he does pick up wins, but the big matches, he's come up short. So I'm glad he got the win here. And I think a few people were surprised by it on social media, but definitely a very big win for Archer. Maybe the biggest win in AEW that he's had. And he picks up the IWGP United States title. So strong ending to the show. And all in all, really good Dynamite this week. They keep the streak going of hot shows. Another great crowd in Texas. And just a lot of fun to watch from start to finish. So I'm going to give the show a solid B+. Definitely check out the main event unless the hardcore style is not your thing with the blood and the fork and all that stuff. But I would say check out that main event. You know, we don't get to see that kind of stuff a lot in mainstream wrestling, so it's cool to have that for all of us that really like our wrestling extra violent. And like I said, next week might even be worse. We'll see. Colin Andrew gives it a B. Mohammed gives it a B-. Corey Jones and Safet give it a B+. Lewis gives it an A. Same thing with Mr. Heavy Metal Hero Dude also gives it an A. Terry gives it a B. Calvin Bowman with an A. Curtis Butler with a B-. And Dylan says another solid A for him. And Greg says, so if AEW gets Daniel Bryan and CM Punk in the next couple months, should WWE be worried? That would be a serious shift in power. Well, it would be huge. Either one of them would be huge for AEW and, you know, among the top tier of guys that could actually be difference makers. But we'll talk more about that on the No DQ review. That's going to be a huge episode of the No DQ review. We got a lot to talk about. All the stuff coming off of Money in the Bank, what's going on with Karrion Kross and NXT, and there's some pretty big news coming out of the NXT tapings, so make sure you head over to NoDQ.com. Of course, you don't want to get spoiled, so don't go there if you want to wait until next week to see what happens. But I can tell you one thing, there's the big news out of that show. You're probably going to get spoiled one way or another, so that's over on NoDQ.com. Make sure you guys check that out and all the news about Daniel Bryan and CM Punk. And you can see the highlights from AEW Dynamite this week. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you next time for the No DQ review. Take care, everyone.